Hi, I'm Chef Jeff from the Sweet and Savory Classroom, and here's a quick tip for your kitchen. So today, I want to teach you a couple of different ways to get a sharp edge on your knife. The biggest complaint I always hear is, my knives at home are dull. What knives should I buy? And actually, that's actually what people say the most. What knives should I buy? And I'm like, well, first, what knives do you have? And they'll tell me they have Wusthof, or they have Henkel, or they have, they have some sort of really nice knife. And then I was like, well, why do you want to get new knives? Well, they're dull, and I don't know how to sharpen them. So herein lies the problem. And I'd like to help you solve that today. Just a couple quick, easy ways, because a sharp knife is actually really fun to use, and it's safer. You've probably heard that before. A sharp knife is a safe knife, and a dull knife is dangerous. And that's because a dull knife, a dull knife takes more pressure. You have to push so much harder to chop through something with a dull knife rather than a sharp knife. And so when you're putting all this extra effort to cut through something and it slips off of that food and goes right into your finger, that's when some choice words that we don't like to say here come out. And so instead, I like to show you how to have a pleasant time cutting and chopping at home, because a sharp knife really does take cooking from a burden to a blessing, all right? And so here's a couple of things I like to use. First, this is a knife sharpener. I can't remember how much I paid for it. It's probably $10, $15 off of Amazon. You might see there's some that are similar, that look similar, but they function differently on the inside. There are the sharpeners that on the inside where it's two fixed points like this, and you usually make like a V, and then you drag your knife through that V. And when you drag your knife, you are just scraping a bunch of metal off of your knife, and it will wear your knife down really, really fast. So this one has wheels on the inside. And so when you come through, you could see and hear the wheels moving. And that is a lot gentler on the knife and still does the job, right? And another product I like, we've been using for a little while, is this guy. This is an electric knife sharpener, and I'll show you how to use it. You can hear the hum. Okay, and it works really, really well. It's a grinder, so it's definitely going to grind a lot of metal off of your knife, but it does it nicely and does it pretty evenly. And the third is the old-fashioned way, with actually a sharpening stone. And they all have their purposes. And so let's talk first about the knives themselves, because we have really two different types of knives, at least when it comes to the chef's knife, which is, for me, it's my main knife. And if you want to learn how to use this properly, I have other videos for you to master the chef's knife, because if you can use one of these really well, you really don't need any other knife in your kitchen. You may want other knives, but you can do almost everything with a chef's knife. But the difference, if you see, is this back part here. This is really thick and heavy, and that one is good because it makes the knife really sturdy, but it doesn't fit in here, okay? And it doesn't fit in this one either. And so when you have a knife with this heavy back end, you have to sharpen it by hand, because if you sharpen it with one of these, if you start the sharpening of the knife where it will fit in, then you'll end up sharpening right here and the rest of the knife, and this part of the knife will get shorter while this part sticks out. And then when you go to cut, it'll be sticking out, and you'll have this space underneath there, and nothing will get chopped through. And that's probably the biggest thing I see when people say that they have these nice knives at home, but they don't work. They don't work because they either are dull or they've been sharpened improperly, and you have this like hole in your knife right here. And then if the knife doesn't touch the cutting board or touch the table, whatever you're cutting on, right? Hopefully a cutting board, then it won't cut through anything. I don't care how expensive the knife was. If it's sharpened improperly, it won't function for you, right? And then so this is a forged steel knife, so it's a lot firmer, and it's a really nice knife to use. But then you have some of these where it's a piece of cut steel. I like these knives. They're nice and light. They're less expensive, but they're really easy to sharpen. And so this one, it doesn't have that thick part at the end. So you can use it in one of these, or you can use it in the electric sharpener. And you can also do it on a sharpening stone. So let's walk you through this one to begin with, all right? So using the cut steel knife with one of these, they usually have numbers on them, a 1 and a 2. And the only thing you really have to focus on is you do have some play right here, all right? And so when you use it, you want to make sure that knife you try to keep it straight up and down, and then make sure you go from end to end. Meaning, don't start right here. Like if you start right here, and that doesn't get worn down, you're gonna have the same problem we were talking about a minute ago, where you're gonna have this part that's taller, and this part gets shorter, and then your knife will have this this space underneath it that doesn't touch the cutting board. And so you want to go from end to end, and you just pull it through. A little bit of pressure is nice. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's probably all this knife needs. And I'm going to go to number 2. So that's kind of a coarse, and number 2 is the fine. And once you do this a few times, as long as you try to really keep your knife straight up and down and try to avoid any wobbling in there, your knife will come out a whole lot better. Make sure and clean it, wipe off any of the fragments from the end of your knife. You'll get some metal fragments coming off, metal shavings. Make sure and clean that off and wash it too before you use it. And again, this knife, it's a great knife, and it sharpens really easily. But the difference between these two when you're sharpening is this metal is a whole lot softer than this one. And so this one I might have to sharpen a whole lot more often. And whereas this one, because the metal is so hard that when I sharpen it, the edge will last a really, really long time. And so you can kind of choose some of your knives by, one, the expense. This one's less expensive than this one. And also how much maintenance you want to do, meaning if I don't mind sharpening more often, I might get this one. If I want to sharpen a whole lot less, I may get something a little bit more expensive that the edge will last a whole lot longer. So there is just, again, this easy pull-through knife sharpener. I've found a lot of success from this one. And then we have you have the electric knife sharpener, right? And I like this electric sharpener. I mean, if I were to be an engineer and redesign it, I would put this cord coming out the side, because the cord sometimes is a problem. I feel like I'm going to cut the cord every so often, and the only time I want to do that is when I'm delivering a baby, which I have delivered 2 babies in my lifetime. True story. So back to sharpening. I'm going to turn this sharpener on, and this has a 1 and a 2 as well. So you got a 1 and a 2, meaning go through here first, because this one is the more coarse one. And you have the same kind of dilemma we have with this one, where the knife can move back and forth. This one you have a little bit of play in here too. So I try to err on just kind of the outsides. So I kind of push more towards the outside and go from the end to end. 1, 2, 3. You need less time going through this one because it's grinding so much. So I did 3 on each side on that one, and then this one. The other difference between this knife sharpener and this one is that when you pull through this one, it gets both sides of the blade at the same time. Whereas this one, it does a single side. So it sharpened this side, then it sharpened this side. Then you go over here and it sharpened this side, and it sharpened this side. So you want to make sure you keep the number of strokes, like going through 3 times here and 3 times here. You want to make sure it's always the same, because you don't want to unevenly wear your knife out. So now we have the forged steel knife, like this one. This is my knife. This was actually a gift from my wife for Christmas, because my other knife I had used for a long, long time. I sharpened it so many times that the knife really it got thin right here, so thin that when I would cut on the table, my knuckles would hit the table, and I would almost bloody my knuckles while I was cutting. So I needed to get a new knife, because I've sharpened it a lot. But this one, this stone, this is a tri-stone, and you can buy a tri-stone, or you can get a dual stone. A dual stone looks like this. It has just 2 sides, and you can find these online. They're relatively inexpensive, and they're probably easier to store at home. And there's all kinds of different stones. You have wet stones, you have oiled stones, you have grinding wheels, and so choose something that's in your price range. Choose something that you feel you can use, and that's hopefully what this video is going to help you do, is be a little bit more proficient at just using the stone itself, because it's really simple to sharpen a knife. And so having a stone around to sharpen your knives is really kind of a nice thing. I keep a stone like this wrapped in a towel that is soaked in oil and in a Ziploc bag in a shelf in my cabinet at home. Here at the classroom, I've got a bunch of tools we can use all the time. But then I just pull it out, and start sharpening, and then put it away, and we're good to go. So there's only 3 main steps that you need when you're sharpening a knife. Okay, the first is we're going to set our angle. The second is we're going to do the same number of strokes on both sides. And the third is we go from end to end. Those are really the only 3 main techniques you need when sharpening a knife. And so my knife stays pretty sharp. So a couple of tips for you. So this one has, you know, the coarse, medium, and fine. You don't always have to start on the coarse or the medium. Sometimes I start on just fine. The same with one of these. It's a coarse. Sorry, that's the coarse, and then we have the fine. Sometimes I just use the fine because my knife only needs a touch-up. And the only time I typically go to the coarse is if, say, I got a nick in the blade or something like that, a nick or a chip, then I have to go back to the coarse and really grind the edge out. Food oils will still have some fragments of the food in them, and they can clog the pores of your stone. So we use mineral oil, which is petroleum-based. And if you're feeling a little irregular, this is also a laxative. Just an extra tip for you. So here we go. I'm just going to put some oil on my stone. I like to put a little oil on and rub it. Now we're about to make a really ugly sound, okay? A really ugly sound, but it has a purpose. So this part of the knife, this is the hardest part of the knife for people to sharpen. It's like 3 times the metal that this is. So if you just go over here and just sharpen the knife, most likely this is not going to get sharpened enough, and it'll start sticking out, and you'll get that hole in your knife, and the hole is ugly. I've fixed a lot of knives, and so the first thing I do is I try to make sure that that this part of my knife, if you can see a slight angle backwards, okay. That slight angle backwards is because I grind it off first, and then I grind the rest of the knife. So I'm going to come in here and make this really ugly sound. It's like fingers down a chalkboard. Ah, terrible. But I always take just a little bit off that end first. Okay. And then we're going to start. So my knife, this is 90 degrees to the stone. That's 45 degrees right here to the stone. I go down somewhere between the 20 and 30 degree range. And so I've been using the same angle for 25 years. And so I kind of lock my wrist at my angle and make sure to go from end to end. Like, don't start here because you're missing that part. Make sure you go from end to end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to turn it and go to the other side. Get my angle, kind of lock my wrist in, go from end to end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you do that, really precisely, like a robot, then you're going to get a really sharp edge. The more robotic you can be, the better. And that's really all you're trying to do to sharpen a knife. You're trying to grind one side down, grind the other side down into a sharp point. That's the goal. And the only way you get that goal is to be just as precise as you can with each stroke. And if you listen when you're doing it, your sound will tell you if you're doing it the same or if your angle changed a little bit. And so you can tell that just by listening. Actually, with all of them, all the tools we have here, use your ears as much as your sight, as much as your hands to put it all together. Then from there, what we do after that is the sharpening. The honing steel. So a lot of times they're called a sharpening steel, but this actually doesn't sharpen anything, right? The goal of this is to put your blade back in place. And so the sharpening stone is what actually grinds the edge down and gives you this point, and makes your knife sharp. But then you take this sharp knife and you go and you pound it, right? You take this sharp knife and you pound it into a table over and over and over. You're going to get all these sometimes visible and a lot of times microscopic little chips and bends and warps in that really sharp edge. So you take this and you use this to kind of bring your edge back to place. So again, you take your knife, it's sharp, and you jam it into a table, it gets all like gnarly at the edge, and we need something to smooth it back out, which will make it feel sharp again for a little bit. And so you use the sharpening steel. So you go from end to end, right? Same number of strokes on each side, and make sure you're using the same angle that you use on the stone. If everything's the same, this will actually do the job it's supposed to. So this is to maintain your edge, in between sharpenings. And then when you use this and your knife still feels dull, it's time to go back to the stone and sharpen again. Right? So that's just a little bit of basics of like how to sharpen a knife. And the more you practice on it, definitely the better it is. I don't mind using the tools, but having a sharpening stone, especially if you have these types of knives, is really important to have if you want to maintain them well and use them. All right? So there you have it today. Hopefully that helps you. And come check out some of our other videos. We have a great YouTube station, and we'd love to see you there.